Hey ceramic students, Mrs. New here. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make the teardrop tree and the scrap slab tree. So these are some little winter tree projects. I love this time of year. I love doing these little trees and being able to bring them out every year. What you might not know about these little teardrop shapes is that hiding underneath is actually a slab. So the way that we construct these is by using a cone slab and a cone template, and then building the clay up on top of that cone form. So today I'm going to show you how to start these. So I'm going to go ahead and set these ones aside. And the way that you're going to begin is just with a regular slab of clay. And you're going to find the cone templates. So the cone templates live in this bag that say cones. And there's all different, sizes and shapes of these. So if you push them together like this, you can kind of see what shape that they will make. Some of them are green, like this one. So you want to pick what shape would work well for your teardrop tree or your scrap slab tree. So I particularly like this kind of tall one. I like this one, and then the other one I like is more of this shape, and it just says cone on it. So this one will make the tree shapes that I was just showing you in the video. So I'm going to use this one today. I've rolled out a slab, I put it through the slab roller, so now I'm just going to cut out my cone shape using the template. You guys are familiar with templates. You've used them in a couple projects now. You might have made a foldy bowl or a little sushi dish. You might have made the coffee cup project using a template, but the first thing I'm going to do is draw it on there. That way, in case I mess it up, I can smooth that with a rib and start over. But I feel like this is a pretty good line here. So now I'm just going to use my needle tool, or you could use a knife, and you're just going to cut out this shape. And notice I'm not doing any texture mat on this because I'm going to be covering it totally with either the little teardrop shapes or the scrap slab shapes. So this is the same thickness as the slab roller, so it's nice and thick, and now I'm going to put it together. So what I'm going to do is just carefully start to shape it into the cone, and I'm going to use my serrated rib, and I just have a little cup of water. So I'm going to slip and score, kind of making some slip as I go, and scoring these edges, and I'm just going to carefully push those edges together. A banding wheel is really helpful as you get going on this project too, but you can see how I'm just kind of pushing those together really carefully, sort of pinching that seam together, and then blending. Okay, so that will make a nice cone shape. You also want to pay attention to this inside part. So take a minute, make sure that this is blended well on the inside and the outside, and that you have a nice base for the next steps of this project. So what you need to know about these little teardrop trees is that you start at the bottom and you work your way up to the top. Okay, so for the teardrop tree, the easiest thing to do is to just make yourself a coil. So I've got, this is my scraps from my slab that I just did. So I'm gonna squish those all back into a ball. I'm gonna check my video, make sure it's still recording. Yes, it is. Okay. And now I'm just gonna start to make a snake. So you guys, again, if you've made handles for trays or coffee cups, you're familiar with kind of how to roll a coil and get a coil going. The reason I'm gonna make a coil is I have to make a bunch of these little teardrops. Like I have to make a lot of these. So the easiest and fastest way to do this, I have found, is to start with a coil. So I'm just gonna roll this on my table, kind of roll this out. You can do the breadstick twist opposite, roll it out again. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is nice to start with a coil for this particular teardrop one, okay? Now there's another one that I kind of do sometimes, I call it the scrappy slab, or the slab scrap one, and I'm going to show you that one here in a minute. But just kind of get a coil rolled out. And again, if it's a little wonky, it's not a big deal. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my needle tool and I'm going to make a bunch of little sections of this, okay? And I'm going to try to make them kind of equal sized. So I'm just going to chop it up, chop, chop, chop. And these are going to turn into my teardrops. So maybe pay attention to how thick your coil is and just chop it up. Chop, 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 chop. Okay? Now each one of these is going to turn into one of my little teardrops. So the quickest way to do that, I think, is just take them and just roll them like that until you get kind of a good teardrop-y kind of shape, okay? And then I'm gonna start with the bottom row, okay? Before I start to slip and score them on there, I'm gonna show you a trick on that too. So what I would do is now just make a bunch of these little teardrops, okay? So you get the idea. But you do want to get those ready because they should be about the same size and the same shape. Now, if you wanted to, you could make the bottom row a little bit bigger and then make them a little smaller as you get towards the top. That works pretty well too. But you're just gonna make a bunch of these so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm rolling them in a ball and I'm kind of tapering one edge to make the little teardrop, and hopefully they're all about the same size and shape. And that's why the coil helped me to do that a lot faster. Okay, so once you have a bunch of these, now it's time to rough up this surface. So I'm gonna take my serrated rib and I'm gonna score up this whole section that I'm gonna be working on. So I told you guys I'm doing the bottom section first, right? So this whole bottom area, I'm going back and forth, I'm cross-hatching, I'm dipping it in the water, kind of making some slip as I go and kind of roughing this up. And it's really important that you start from the bottom and kind of work your way up. I also would probably put this on a banding wheel, but I'll do that here in just a minute. So now I'm gonna take my little teardrops, and same thing, as I add them, I'm just gonna do a little scoring. And then where they're touching on this bottom row, you wanna set it on the table and make sure they don't come out too far out from, like you don't want them way out here. So make sure that the bottom of the teardrop is just kind of touching the table, okay? And then I would do a whole row like this. So you can see this project takes a little bit of time. Also be careful not to make your teardrops too thick, because if you think about it, I'm adding on the thickness of that slab and then I'm adding more. So and we know that things that are too thick in the kiln can have problems. So not too huge on the teardrops. And notice they're not like balls like this. They're not like totally round like that. Okay, so make sure they have the teardrop shape. Okay, so I'm slipping and scoring as I go. I'm kind of dipping in some water and I'm working on just the bottom row, okay? And I would do that all the way around. So pretend for the sake of the demo video, I have this all the way around. Now I'm gonna take my finger, or you could take like a little wooden tool, and I'm gonna smear upwards. Sometimes you might need to put your hand on the inside and support this because this clay is pretty wet. But I'm gonna smear that on. So that does two things. It kind of creates this graceful, gentle like curve of the little snowballs, but then it also helps to blend them on there, right? So they don't fall off. So make sure that you smooth your whole row of your teardrops. So I would have this whole bottom row smooth like this. Now for the second row, you need to pay attention to where you're putting those, and you wanna stagger them kind of like tiles or bricks, right? Like if you were a bricklayer. So for my next row, I think I'm gonna make my teardrops a little bit smaller. Maybe they go a little smaller as I go up. I'm gonna make my teardrops and kind of get them ready. And then I'm going to be putting them in the seam area of where this is coming together. So let me see if I can show you that. So now that I've got them all smoothed, I'm gonna go ahead and just a little bit, kind of more on the slab than on here, I'm gonna rough that up a little bit and rough up my teardrop. And now where I put that is gonna be right in between these two bumps or two teardrops, okay? And I wanna give it some room. So I'm kind of just putting the bottom one just where those two sort of come together, okay? And then let's do the next one. So this one would go again, in between where those two come together would be the next one. And I would keep building my entire second row, and you get the idea. I would then blend it up, right? And get that nice graceful shape. If things don't line up completely, you might have to make like a smaller one and kind of fit it in there as you go around. But with any luck, you'll get a pretty good match, okay? And as you can tell, my next layer that will probably be even smaller is going to go, you know, in between those ones. So you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So let's look at one of the ones that's done. This project takes at least 2 class periods, sometimes more, depending on your details. So let's look at these. See how the bottom row and then these go in between, and how they, because of the blending, it creates that smooth finish. Now when you get to the top, what you're going to do is basically just smooth it all the way up, and that what I've done in the past is just cut out a star out of a little slab and sort of slip and score that on there to finish that off. Okay, so that is the teardrop tree, starting with the cone base and working our way up from the bottom row, adding our teardrops as we go up towards the top. Okay, so I want to show you kind of a modified version of this, and I call this one the scrappy slab tree. Okay, so for the scrappy slab tree, which is similar in nature, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I have an extra slab, okay, and I'm rolling it quite a bit thinner than the slab roller. So this is hand rolled out with a rolling pin, and it's thin. I'm going to pick a texture mat. Actually, I'm going to move my little example tree for a second, and I'm going to roll on a texture. So this one is not using the coil and the little teardrops. On this one, I'm going to use scrappy slabs. So I'm going to put some texture on my slab before I begin. My slab is thinner than the cone of my tree, okay? And what I want to do is decide what shape I want to do. So maybe I want to do a scrappy slab, and all of it is going to be triangles. That's a pretty easy one to do, because check this out. I can make a lot of triangles in short order. Okay, maybe I want to do a scrappy slab and all of them are just going to be rectangles like this. Maybe I'm going to do a scrappy slab and have some sort of other shape. Those are the two that I feel like students use most of the time. So whatever you choose, you're going to get your texture on there and then create a series of either the triangles or the rectangles. All right, so here's my triangles and my rectangles. And this one starts the same way. So what I started with, go back to my example one, is I started with a cone. All right, so what I've done is I've made the cone, I've smoothed it together, and then I'm gonna do this the same way. So let's say I'm gonna do the triangle one. I would rough up the bottom. I'm gonna start from the bottom. But if I don't like the shape of the little teardrop tree, I can do this with the little flags, right? These little triangles. So same thing, I would want to take a minute and slip and score at least the top part of that slab, and then think about where it's hitting. I don't want it to point out too far from the tree. I don't want that to break. And I would start to kind of lay these little flags or these little triangles on the bottom row first and kind of build my way up. Okay, so let me just get a couple on here so you can get an idea of what this might look like. Again, if you roll out the slab and cut out all your triangles to start, it goes a little faster as you start the building part, okay? So let's say I have all my triangles, like I have a whole row. Same thing, I'd want to carefully blend this up and pull that clay up and blend that before I put on the second row. I'm losing a little bit of my texture, but that's okay. So my second row, again, I would layer this in. I'm going to kind of make this a little smaller. I would layer in my second row of little triangles kind of in between, just like I did with the teardrops, right? In between those areas and blend up. And so this just gives a different shape at the end. On this side, you can kind of see where I started to do rectangles. So you could do the same idea with this layering of the scrappy slabs with little rectangles if you wanted to try that shape. So I would encourage you to maybe make one style and then maybe make a second one and try one of these, either the little triangle shapes or the rectangle shapes. And it kind of has a little bit more of a scrappy look to it, but I really like the way that it turns out. It's just something different and unique, and it has a different texture. Okay, so those are the teardrop trees and the scrappy slab trees for our little winter tree project, using the cone templates and using some slabs and some coils and some creativity. Have fun with this one, you guys. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.